Good morning everyone, I'm Mrs Driver and welcome to my assembly entitled Our World, Our Environment. The theme for this assembly is something I'm really passionate about, looking after our environment. But what is environment? The dictionary definition for environment is that the air, the water and the land on which people and animals and plants live. But it also includes the conditions that we live in or work in and the way in which they influence how we feel and how effectively we can work. So quite often we talk about how important it is to preserve our world for future generations, which is absolutely true. But also we should ensure that the environment we experience right now is one that we want to live in. The conditions we experience can have a really big influence on how we feel and how we work. I'm sure you've all heard of climate change. Climate change is affecting our world and having dire consequences. And it's happening right now. In just the past few decades, temperatures have been rising and worsened extreme weather events. Wildfire seasons are months longer, coral reefs have been bleached of their colours, and things also affect human life. Changes in climate can affect food production, water availability, wildlife and human health. Weather conditions such as storms can damage infrastructure like roads, rail networks and buildings, having a dire effect on our environment. But it's human activities that have increased carbon dioxide emissions, driving up these temperatures. The Earth's average temperature is about 15 degrees Celsius, but has been much higher and lower in the past. There are natural fluctuations in the climate, but scientists say temperatures now are rising faster than many other times. This is linked to the greenhouse effect, which describes how the Earth's atmosphere traps in some of the sun's energy. Solar energy radiating back to space from the Earth's surface is absorbed by greenhouse gases and re-emitted in all directions. This heats both the lower atmosphere and the surface of the planet. Without this effect, the Earth would be about 30 Celsius colder and hostile to life. Scientists believe we are adding to the natural greenhouse effect, with gases released from industry and agriculture trapping more energy and increasing the temperature. And this climate change is also known as global warming. Burning fossil fuels, deforestation and agriculture all create greenhouse gases. When we burn fossil fuels, we release carbon dioxide into the air. Forests remove and store carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Cutting them down means that carbon dioxide builds up quicker since there are no trees to absorb it. Not only that, trees release the carbon they are stored when we burn them. In agriculture, planting crops and rearing animals releases many different types of greenhouse gases into the air. For example, animals produce methane, which is 30 times more powerful than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. The nitrous oxide used for fertilizer is 10 times worse and is nearly 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. While COVID-19 has shaken much of human society, the threat posed by global warming has not gone away. We are producing over 300 million tonnes of plastic every year. That's nearly equivalent to the weight of the entire human population. 50% of that is used for single-use purpose only, utilised just for a few moments, but on the planet for at least several hundred years. More than 8 million tonnes of plastic is dumped into our oceans every year. Almost all plastic is derived from materials made from fossil fuels. The process of extracting and transporting those fuels, then manufacturing plastic, creates billions of tonnes of greenhouse gases. The more plastic we make, the more fossil fuels we need, the more we exacerbate climate change. During the pandemic, personal protective equipment, or PPE, has driven increased plastic pollution. If the global population adheres to a standard of 1 disposable face mask per day, the pandemic could result in a monthly global consumption of waste of 129 billion face masks and 65 billion gloves. Also, individual choices during lockdowns are also increasing plastic demand. For example, packaged takeout meals and home-delivered groceries contributed an additional 14,000 tonnes of plastic waste during Singapore's 8-week lockdown. We have been in this situation for a while, and it is very important that we adhere to the government guidelines and that we wear face masks and protect ourselves from the virus. But what can we be doing to prevent the use of single-use plastics? What can you do right now to reduce your plastic consumption? Firstly, wear a reusable face mask. They can be washed and reworn again and again, and therefore it's more sustainable in terms of the environment, and it makes it a cost-effective choice. Secondly, refill your hand sanitizer. Small hand sanitizer bottles are perfect to keep in your bag, in your pocket or on your lanyard, but don't keep buying them. Refill at home or refill using the hand sanitizer stations at school. Another way to reduce your plastic consumption is to use a refillable bottle. You can refill at home or refill at one of our handy water stations around the school. This is an easy way to reduce your plastic consumption. You can also make sensible food choices and try to avoid plastic packaging or wrapping where possible. Also, put your rubbish in the right bin. We're really lucky that we have a lot of recycling around our community these days, so put your rubbish in the right place. Not currently recycled is the message I keep seeing on sweet, crisps, biscuits and nut packages. This is crazy. All of this plastic will only end up in landfill. It's also not unusual to spot sweet wrappers from 20 years ago washed up on beaches. This goes to show how persistent plastic is. Plastic from sweets and crisp wrappers is often made from composites of plastic, making them really expensive and difficult to recycle. So you could cut down on sweets and crisps, but if you really can't cut them out, try to reduce the use of having small packets, so have a big bag of crisps rather than 6 small ones. In terms of sweets, don't go for ones that are individually wrapped. Try to look for big bags of sweets instead. Other things you could do are reduce the plastic by using soap rather than shower gel. Reusable bags, like fabric bags, are much better. And also, ladies, ditch the wet wipes. Wet wipes are an awful product in terms of plastic. They also end up in our ocean and break down into microfibers, risking sea creatures. What can you do instead? Use a flannel. Use paper tissues, use cotton wool pads, and refill your products at home. Recycling or taking the bus rather than driving to work has its place, but scientists are increasingly pointing to a deeper lifestyle change that would be the single biggest way to help our planet: eating far less meat. A swath of research released over the past year has laid bare to the hefty impact that eating meat, especially beef and pork, has upon the environment by fueling climate change and polluting landscapes and waterways. Industrialised agriculture and the onset of the worst species of extinction crisis since the demise of the dinosaurs means that livestock and humans now make up 96% of all mammals. But despite consuming the vast majority of farmland, meat and dairy accounts for just 18% of all food calories and around a third of protein. The mighty hoofprint of farmed meat isn't just inefficient. Deforestation to make way for livestock, along with methane emissions from cows and fertiliser use, creates much more greenhouse gas emissions as all the world's cars, trucks and aeroplanes. Meat rearing practices risk mass extinctions of other animals, as well as spawning significant pollutions of streams, rivers, and ultimately the ocean. Last year, scientists warned that huge reductions in meat eating are required if the world is to stave off dangerous climate change, with beef consumption in Western countries needing to drop by 90%, replaced by 5 times more beans and pulses. The consumption of pork, milk and eggs will also need to decline sharply, all as the world's population balloons by an extra 2 billion people by 2050. Researchers say there will be a need to be a global shift to a flexitarian diet to help keep global temperatures from increasing and breaching the 2 centigrade limit agreed by governments. So, what is a flexitarian and how can you become one? Following a flexitarian diet highlights an increased intake of plant-based meals without completely eliminating meat. It's about adding new foods to your diet as opposed to excluding any, which can be extremely beneficial for health. The flexitarian diet is about being more environmentally sustainable and reducing the meat consumption in exchange for alternative protein sources. It doesn't mean you have to cut meat out altogether, it's just about cutting down a bit. Quite often we think of animal meat as being an excellent source of protein in our diets. A well-planned vegetarian and vegan diet can provide just as much protein as animal products, along with all 9 essential amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein that you must obtain through food. There's protein that can be found in nuts, seeds, beans and legumes. If you eat dairy, there's a lot of protein in eggs, yogurt, milks and cheese. Vegetables and fruits can also be a great source of protein. So, being a flexitarian to support our environment isn't about giving up meat, it's just about changing your diet. So what can you do? Well, there's been an initiative around for some time now called Meat-Free Mondays, and this is where people decide to just eat vegetarian meals on a Monday, and then they can eat meat at other times in the week. Could you go even further? Could you go for a vegan Tuesday? Could you set a goal and maybe see whether you could cut it down across the week? I've been doing this for some time. I started with Meat-Free Mondays. I moved on to vegetarian meals throughout the week, and I've made a decision to cut meat completely out of my diet now. But that's completely up to you. Making small changes do make a difference. So even if you're able to be a little bit more flexitarian, you are making a difference. Greta Thunberg gained international recognition for speaking up about climate change. She is a 17-year-old girl who grew up in Stockholm in Sweden and who is known for her straightforward speaking manner both in public and to political leaders and assemblies. She criticises world leaders for their failure to make sufficient action to address the climate crisis. She is a young person who has made a considerable amount of difference in the last year or so. But her activism started after convincing her parents to adopt several lifestyle changes to reduce their own carbon footprint at home. Since then, she's engaged many other young people to speak out about climate change and make lifestyle changes in order to make a difference. Greta's book has a very appropriate title: No One is Too Small to Make a Difference. No matter who we are or how powerless we may feel, we must all stand up to protect our planet and the environment that we live in. Greta also says everything needs to change and it has to start today. And that starts with you. I hope this assembly has inspired you to make some small changes to make a difference. So what are you going to do to look after our world and our environment?